Peter Pan, Chapter 5, The Island Come True. Feeling that Peter was on his way back from the Netherland had again woken into life. We ought to go to use the perfect and say whackin, but woke in better and was always used by Peter. In his absence, things are usually quiet on the island. The fairies take an hour longer in the morning, the beasts attend to their young, the redskins feed heavily for 6 days and nights, and when the pirates and the Lost Boys meet, they merely bite their thumbs at each other. But when the coming of Peter, who hates lethargic, they are underway again. If you put your ear to the ground now, you would hear the whole island seething with life. On this evening, the chief forces the islands were disposed as follows. The Lost Boys were out looking for Peter. The pirates were out looking for the Lost Boys. The redskins were out looking for the pirates. The beasts were out looking for the redskins. There were goings round and around the island, but they did not meet because all of them were going the same rate. All wanted blood, except the boys, who liked it as a rule, but tonight were out to greet their captain. The boys on the island vary, of course, in numbers, according to they get killed and so on, and when they seemed to be growing up, which against the rules, Peter thins them out. But this time there were 6 of them, counting the twins as 2. Let us pretend to lie here among the sugar canes and watch them as they steal by the single file, with each in hand on his dagger. They are forbidden by Peter to look at it at least like him. And they were the skins of the bears slain by themselves, in which they are so round and furry, and when the fall they roll, they have therefore become very sure-footed. The first to pass is Toodles. Not the least brave, but the most unfortunate of the entire gallant band. He had been in fewer adventures than any of them because of the big things constantly happening just when he had stepped around the corner. All would be quiet. He would take the opportunity of going off to gather a few sticks for firewood. And then when he returned, the others would be sweeping up the blood. This ill luck had given him a gentle melancholy to his countenance. But instead of souring his nature, had sweetened it, so that he was quite the humblest of boys. Poor kind Toodles. There is danger in the air for you tonight. Take care, lest an adventure is now offered you, which, if accepted, will plunge you into deepest of woes. Toodles, the fairy Tink, who is bent on mischief this night, is looking for a tool for doing her mischief, and she thinks you are the most easiest tricks of the boys. Where, Tinkerbell? Would that he would hear us? But we are not really on the island as he passed by, biting his knuckles. Next comes Nibs, the gay debutante, followed by Slightly, who cuts whistles out of trees and dances ecstatically to his own tunes. Slightly is the more conceited of the boys. He thinks he remembers the days before he was lost, and with their manners and customs, and had given his nose an offensive tilt. Curly is fourth. He is a pickle, always getting into predicaments, and so often he had to deliver up his persons, what Peter said sternly, "Stand forth, the one who did this thing, that now in the commands he stand forth automatically, whether he had done it or not." Last come the twins, who cannot be described because we should be sure to be describing the wrong one. Peter never quite knew what twin were, and Ben were not allowed to know anything he did not know. So these two were always vague about themselves and did their best to give satisfaction by keeping close together in an apologetic sort of way. The boys vanished in gloom, and after a pause, but not a long pause, for thinking so briskly on their island, comes the pirates on their tracks. We hear them before they are seen, and in the waves the same dreadful song. Ye vast belay, yo ho, he ho, heave to, a pirates we go. And if we part by a shot, we're sure to be meet below. A more villainous looking lot never hung in a row on execution dock. Here, a little in advance, ever and again, with his head to the ground, listening for his great arms bare piece of 8, and his ear on an ornament, is the handsome Italian Zelo, who cut his name in the letter of blood, and on the back of the governor on the prison of Gallo. The gigantic black behind him had his many names since he dropped the one which dusky mothers still terrify their children on the banks of the Guano. Here is Bill Dukes, every inch of him tattooed, the same Bill Dukes who got 6 dozen on the walruses from the Flint before he would drop the bag of Portuguese gold pieces called Mordos, and Cookson, said to be Black Murphy's brother, the gentleman Starkey, once an usher in a public school, and still dainty in his ways of killing, and Skylight, the Irish-born Schmied, an oddly gentleman who stabbed, so to speak, without offense, and was the only non-conformist in Hook's crew, the Noodler, whose hands were fixed on backwards, and Rob Mullins and Alf Mason, and many other ruffians, along known afeard of Spanish Main. In the midst of them, the blackest and largest in the dark setting, reclaimed James Hook, or as he wrote himself, Jez Hook, of whom it is said he was the only man that the sea cook feared. He laid it at his ease a rough chariot drawn and propelled by his men, and instead of the right hand he had an iron hook which every ion he enraged them into increased their pace. "Aye, dogs," the terrible man treated and addressed them. "Aye, these the dogs," they obeyed him. In person he was dead-looking and dark-faced, and his hair was dressed with long curls, which as the distance looking like black candies, and gave a sugarly threatening expression to his handsome countenance. His eyes were of the blue of forget-me-not and the profound melancholy sea. When he was plunging his hook into you, at which time 2 red spots appeared, then them the light they up horribly in a manner something of the grand Sigur still clung to him, so that he even ripped you up with an air, and I have been told that he was a storyteller of repute. He was never more sinister than when he was the most polite, when he was probably the truest test of breeding and entanglement of his description, even when he was swearing no less the distance of the demure, showing him one of the defendant cast of his crew. A man of intolerable courage, it was said that the only thing shield at was the sight of his own blood, which were thick as of an unusual color, and dressed he somewhat appear the attire associated with the name of Charles II, having heard it said in some earlier period of his career that he bore a strange resemblance to the ill-fated Stuart, and in his mouth he had a holder of his own contrivance, which embittled him to smoke 2 cigars at once. But undoubtedly the grimmest part of him was his iron claw. All right, here's a picture of him. That's who we've been describing. This guy right here, like Captain Hook. Let us now kill a pirate to show Hook's method. Skylights will do. As they pass, Skylights lurches clumsily against him, roughing his lace collar at the hook. Shoot forth! There is a tear sounding in the one screech, and the body of the kick aside. The pirates pass on. He had not even taken the cigars out of his mouth. Such is a terrible man, against whom Peter Pan is spit. Which will win? On the trails of the pirates, stealing noiselessly down the warpath, which was not visible to the index-piercing eyes, come the redskins. Every one of them was with his eyes peeled. They carried tomahawks and knives, and their naked bodies gleamed with paint and oil. Strewn around them are the scalps of the boys, as well as the pirates, for these are the Pinacari tribes, and not to be confused with the softer heart Delawares or the Hurons, and the Vans or the Four, and the great big little Panther. A brave of so many scalps that in his present position they somewhat impede his progress. Scalps, that's your hair. Alright. Bringing up the rear in the place of the greatest danger come Tiger Lily, proud, erect, a princess in her own right. She is the most beautiful of the dusky Diana goddesses of the wood, the belle of the Pianacas, flirting, cold, loving it by turns. There is not a brave who would not have the wayward thing to wife, but she straves off athar with the hatchet. Observe how they pass over falling twigs without making the slightest noise. The only sound to be heard is their somewhat heavy breathing. In fact, in that they are a little fat, just how now after they heavy gorging, but in time they will work it off. For the moment, however, it constitutes the chief danger. The redskins disappearing as they have come like shadows, and soon their place is taken by the beasts, a great motley procession, lions, tigers, bears, and innumerable smaller savage things that flee from them. For every kind of beast, and more particularly all the man-eaters, live cheek by jowl on the Favor Island. Their tongues are hanging out. They are hungry tonight. When they have passed, comes the last figure of all the gigantic crocodiles. We shall see who she is looking presently. The crocodiles passes, but soon the boys appear against the procession. Must continue identifying until one of the parties stops or changes its pace. Then quickly they will be toppled on each other. All are keeping a sharp lookout in front, but none suspect the danger may be creeping up from behind. This shows how real the island was. The first to fall out of the moving circle was the boys. They flung themselves down on the turf, close to the underground home. "I do wish Peter would come back," every one of them said nervously, though the height and still mourning in the breath. They were all larger than their captains. "I am the only thing who is not afraid of the pirates," Slightly said, and the stone they prevailed his being the general's favorite. But perhaps some distant sound disturbed him, for he added hastily, "But I wish he would come back and tell us whether he has heard anything more about Cinderella." They talked of Cinderella and Toodles? Was confident that his mother must have been very like her. It was one of Peter's absence that they could speak of mothers, the subject being forbidden by him as silly. "All I remember about my mother," Nibs told him, "is that she often said to my father, 'Oh, how I wish I had a cheekbone of my own. I don't know what a cheekbone is, but I should just love to give my mother one.'" While they talked and they heard a distant sound, you or I, not being the wild things of the woods, wouldn't have heard, but they heard it, and it was the grim song. Yo ho, the pirate's life, the flags of skulls and bones, a merry happy, a Hampton rope, and a heavy, a hay for Davy Jones. At once the lost boys put where they are. They are no longer there. Rabbits could not have disappeared more quickly. I would tell you where they are, with the exception of Nibs, who had darted away and turned around, and there they already in their homes under the grounds, a very delightful residence of which we shall see in a good deal presently. But for now, they have reached it, for there is no entrance to be seen, not so much as a large stone, which, if it rolled away, would disclose the mouth of the cave. Look closely, however, and you may note that there are 7 large trees, each with a hole in its hollow trunk, and as large as a boy. There are 7 entrances to the homes underground, for which Hook has been searching in vain these many a moons. And will he find it tonight? As the pirates advanced, they quickly eyed the starlight, Nibs disappearing throughout the woods, and at once his pistola flashed out. But an iron claw gripped his shoulder. "Captain, let's go," he cried, withering. Now for the time, we hear the first voice. "Hook!" It was a black voice, but put the pistol first, it was said threateningly. It was one of those boys you hate. I could hate. Shot him dead. I could have shot him dead. Aye. And the sound would have been tigers, lilies, redskins upon us. Do you want to lose your scalp? Shall I after him, Captain? Asked pathetically Smeed, and tickled him with Johnny Corkscrew. Smeed, and presently named for everything, and his cutlass was Johnny Corkscrew, because he wiggled in and out of the room. One of them mentioned many lovable traits in Smeed's. For instance, after killing it with spectacles, he wiped instead of his weapon. Johnny's silent fellow, he reminded Hook. Not now, Smeed, Hook said dartingly. He is only one, and I want the mischievous all 7 scattered and look for them. The pirates disappeared among the trees, and in a moment their captain Smeed were alone. Hook heavily, a heavy sigh. I know not why it was. Perhaps it was because the soft beauty of the evening, but they came over him into this desire, the confidence to his faithful bosun, the story of his life. He spoke long and earnestly, but what it was all about Smeed, who was rather stupid, did not know in the least. Later he caught the word Peter. Most of all, Hook was saying passionately, I want their captain, Peter Pan. 'Twas he cut off my arm. He brandished the hook, threatening. I waited so long to shake his hand with this. Oh, I'll tear him. And yet, said Smeed, I have often heard you say that Hook was worth a scorn of hand for combining the hair and other homely uses. Aye, the captain answered. If I was a mother, I would pray to have my children born with this instead of that. And he cast a look of pride upon his iron hand, and one of the scorn upon the other. Again flew he frown. Peter flung my arm, he said, wincing, to a crocodile that happened to be passing by. I have often, said Smeed, noticed your strange dread of crocodiles. Not of crocodiles, Hook corrected him, but that one crocodile. He lowered his voice. It's liked my arm so much, Smeed, that he has followed me ever since, from the sea to sea, from land to land, licking his lips for the rest of me. In a way, said Smeed, it's sort of a compliment. I want no such compliments, Hook barked continuously. I want Peter, who first gave the brute taste for me. He sat down on a large mushroom, and now there was a quiver in his voice. Smeed, he said huskily, that crocodile would have had me before this, but by luck and chance it swallowed a clock, which goes tick-tock inside, and so before it can reach me, I hear the tick of the bolt. He laughed, but in a hollow way. Some day, said Smeed, the clock will run down, and then he will get you. Hook wetted his dry lips. Hey, he said, that's the fear that haunts me. Since sitting down, he had felt curiously warm. Smeed, he said, this seat is hot. He jumped up. Odds, bobs, hammers, longs, I'm burning. They examined the mushroom, which was a size of a solid unknown of a mainland. They tried to pull it up, and it came away at once in their hands, for it had no root. Stranger still, smoke began at once to ascend. The pirates looked at each other. A chimney! They exclaimed. They had indeed discovered the chimney of the home underground. It was custom of the boys to stop it with mushrooms when the enemies were in the neighborhood. Not only smoke came out of it, there came also children's voices, for so far so safe did the boys feel in their hiding place that there were gantly chattering. The pirates listened grimly as they replaced the mushroom. They looked around them and noticed the holes in the 7 trees. Did you hear them say Peter Pan from home? Smeed whispered, fidgeting with Johnny Corkscrew. Hood nodded. He stood for a long time, lost in thought, and at last a curdling smile lit up his squirrely face. Smeed had been waiting for it. Your plan, Captain? He cried eagerly. To return to the ship, Hook replied slowly, through his teeth, and cooks a large rich cake of jolly thickness with green sugars on it. There can be but one room below, for there is but one chimney. The silly moles had not the sense to see that they did not need a door apiece that showed them they have no mother. We will leave the cake on the shore of the mermaid's lagoon. These boys are always swimming about there, playing with the mermaids. They will find the cake. They will gobble it up, because having no mother, they don't know how dangerous 'tis to eat rich damp cake. He bursted into laughter. Ah, ha, 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 ha. Not hollow laughter, but an honest laugh. Aye, they will die. Smead had listened without growing admiration. It's the wickedest, prettiest policy ever I heard of, he cried, and in the exhaustion they danced and sang, Avast, belay, when I appear. By fear they overtook, none not left up your bones with you, have shaken claws with took. They began a verse, but they never finished it, for another sound broke and stilled them. There was the first such a tiny sound, and a leaf might have fallen on it and smothered it, but as it came nearer, it was more distinct. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Hook stood shuddering, 1 foot in the air. The crocodile! He gasped. A bound away, followed by his bosun. It was indeed the crocodile. It had passed the redskins, who were now on the trail of another pirate. It oozed on after Hook. Once more the boys emerged into the opening, but the dangers of the night air were not over yet, for presently Nibs rushed into the mist pursued by the backs of wolves. Their tongues off the pursued were hanging out. They bayed of them with horrible, save me, cried Nibs, falling on the ground. But what can we do? What can we do? It was a high compliment to Peter that the dire moment their thoughts turned to him. What would Peter do? They cried simultaneously. Almost in the same breath they cried, Peter would look at them through their legs, and then he would let us do what Peter would do. It was quite the most successful way of defying wolves, and as one boy then bent and looked through their legs, the next moment the long won but victory came quickly, for the boys advanced upon the terrible attitudes of the wolves, dropping their tails and fleeing. Now Nibs rose from the ground, and the others thought that his starving eyes still saw the wolves. But it was not wolves he saw. I have seen wonderful things, he cried, as they gathered around him eagerly. A great white bird. It's flying this way. What kind of bird? Do you think it? I don't know, said Nibs, awestruck, but looks so weary, and as it flies it moans. Poor Wendy. Poor Wendy. I remember, saying slightly instantly, there are birds called Wendies. See it comes, cried Curly, pointing to Wendy's in the heaven. Wendy is now almost overhead. They could hear their plaintive cry. They came in even more distinct, shrill voice of Tinker Bell. The jealous fairy had now cast off the disguise of friendship and was darting at her victim from every direction, pinching savagely each time she touched. Hello, Tink, cried the wondering boys. Tink rang out, Peter wants you to shoot the Wendy. It was not in their nature to question what Peter's orders. Let us do what Peter wishes, cried the simple boys. Quick, bows, arrows! All but Toots propped down their trees. He had a bow and an arrow with him, and Tink noted it and rubbed her little hands. Quick, Toodles, quick, she screamed. Pete will be so pleased. Toodles excitedly fitted the arrow to his bow. Out of the way, Tink, he shouted, And then he fired when Wendy fluttered to the ground with an arrow in her breast. Okay. Out of the way, Tink, he shouted. And then he fired, and Wendy fluttered to the ground with an arrow to her breast. That was the end of chapter 5. Alright, all of you. Sweet dreams. There's more to come, even though Wendy got shot by an arrow.